think it would have been helpful if I had really understood that most of what authors and writers need to learn or need to be helped with is less about the craft, because we're all naturally interested in what makes good writing work well. I think what we really need to work on harder is our mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the place where I've been able to help people the most is um, just helping them hear the reasons they're not writing and the
Mm-hmm.
fears that they have around writing, and helping them bring that to the surface and look at it and go, oh, is that really such a big deal? So I think
Mm-hmm.
what I would encourage writers to understand, that I've learned over the years, is that the hardest thing about writing is letting yourself do it. And you
Mm-hmm.
can learn all the other stuff. You can
Yeah.
practice all the other stuff. You can take a class about how to write good dialogue. All of that stuff you can get from out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing you can't get is that permission, that inner authority, that belief in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we have to, I think, constantly work on.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sarah Rosette.
And I'm Jamie Albright. And this week on the show, we have
Julie Duffy.
Yes, we do. And y'all, it was really great.
Yeah, we had a great time talking to her about writing short stories and flash fiction and how that can help you as a writer, help you get unstuck. There was a lot, like when we got off the call, we were thinking, let's do this, and we could do this, how you can use it for marketing.
Yeah, you could use it for marketing. Sarah suggested doing something in your newsletter, like a flash fiction story that's taken,
about whatever's coming, like if you have a book coming out, because the way Julie describes it, it made me think, I think I could do this. A lot of times I've thought, I don't know if I could do flash fiction because it's so short. But I thought it was really interesting. Really got a lot out of this one.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. What's been going on with you?
Well, let's see. I finished the book, finished the draft. Woohoo! That's like my big news. That's all I've been doing. I got that done. Went out of town for a couple of days, so that always interrupts the writing schedule stuff. But it was good. It was good to get away. I'm putting the draft aside for a little bit. I'm going to work on the special edition of a book that's going to come out this spring, late spring, early summer. So I'm going to try out all that fun stuff that Book Vault has, the special end papers and the ribbons. I'm going to do a test thing, and I'll probably.
And then, are you going to do a Kickstarter for that too?
I don't think I'm going to do a Kickstarter. I think this time I'm going to just release on my website, special edition on my website only. And that will be first, and then I'll release it on the retailers. And then I may do another Kickstarter for another book later, but there's so much work, and I feel like I need to get the book out.
Right.
And I have people who are waiting for it. So I don't know. I'm just trying it to see how that goes. So trying a store release first and see what happens. So that's my plan right now. I'll keep you updated.
Yeah, let us know. Let us know.
So what about you? What's going on?
Just writing. Okay. Pro tip. Do not plan a release the Monday after you get back from a conference where you're doing 2 presentations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I did that. The thing is, I don't have anywhere set that I could release that book on Thursday or Friday of next week, but I need it set up because I got to have the links in the other books because I'm doing free runs and, sales on those books. And so, I've just got a list. It just keeps growing. And, I'm leaving town on today's Tuesday, and I'm leaving town on Thursday morning. So that's tricky. So I may be working while I'm at the conference, which I never do because I just feel like if I'm going to a conference, I should go to the conference.
Be there, be
I
present.
should be present, but I may have to do some work. So yeah, it's but I sent out ARCs yesterday, and y'all, one of my really good friend reader, she read it in less than an hour, and I'm like, what?
She's like,
and
next,
please.
please.
I thought, well, maybe she skimmed it, and I was like, and then she sent me 3 typos, and I'm like, no, she didn't skim it.
Wow.
So I knew it was short, but I didn't know it was that short, and
it's okay.
but
we're talking about shorter fiction today anyway.
Yes,
so
yes. I'm just choosing to look at it as they can just get to my longer stuff faster. That's how I'm framing it in my mind. But the good thing is everyone I've heard back from just can't stop talking about the epilogue and how funny it is and how sexy it is. And so that is good because, you want to leave them on a high. You really want them to want more. So that's always my goal with an epilogue. So that worked. But yeah, that's it. That's about all I'm doing. It's a lot. And seems like there was something else, but I can't remember now. So we can get on.
We'll talk about it next time.
Yeah, we don't have any supporters this week, right?
No new supporters, but if you want to support the podcast, yes, you can at wishidknownthenforwriters.com/support.
Yeah.
And thanks to all our continuing supporters. We really appreciate it. If you want to drop a question into Slack for the Slack just for the supporters, please do. We would love to chat with you over there.
Yeah.
Or there's the Facebook group for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, before we get to the interview, we should also mention that Julie talks about the Story a Day in May challenge. So it runs all the month of May, and she has some helpful resources for that. There's a community, but you don't have to start it on May 1st. You can join anytime. So this is going out a little bit later in May, but even if you listen to this a month or 2 from now, there's still resources there and a community that you can get involved in.
Yeah. Yep. All right.
So let's get on to the interview. Here is Julie. Today, we are really excited to talk with Julie Duffy. Hi, Julie. How are you?
Hi, great to be here.
Well, we are excited you're here.
Let me read your bio and we'll jump into the questions right after that. Julie Duffy is a writer and the founder of Story a Day May Challenge and writing community. Originally from Scotland, she lives in Pennsylvania with her husband in a basement full of musical instruments and board games. That sounds fun.
Fun, yeah. Party at Julie's house. Well, how did you get started working with writers?
I always wrote, and I was going to go into journalism, and then I got derailed by moving to the US for a boy, and so I took a job with a startup which was helping authors to access digital printing and print on demand, and it was the first company that had figured out how to offer that directly to authors. So it was brand new. We spent all of our time sort of explaining it to people. And this was before Amazon was doing KDP or anything like that. So this was sort of exploring that whole space. So that was back in 1998. And so I started working with writers then to help them get their books. Sometimes they were new authors, sometimes they were mid-list authors who had their rights revert back to them. So there was a wide range of understanding of the business of writing and publishing. And I was learning as I was going as well at that point. So yeah, I've been working with writers since about 1998 and always with a focus on, at first with a focus on helping them get published. And later I pivoted more to helping them actually get words on the page.
So that's where Story a Day came in?
That is where Story a Day came in, because I had worked so much with people who were at the publishing end of the process. And I myself was writing articles and for magazines and things like that. So I was constantly in that publishing space. And when it came to fiction, I knew a lot about publishing. I knew a little bit about marketing, and I was getting all excited about that. And then I realized I didn't have anything to market because I wasn't actually writing. So I decided that I would challenge myself because I really wanted to get back to fiction, and it's been a long time since I'd been writing fiction because school pulls you away from that, and jobs pull you away from that, and then I had kids, and so I decided I really needed to be writing, and knowing myself, I needed kind of this boot camp approach, something that would shock me into writing more and keep me distracted from getting the shiny objects of all of the marketing blogs, everything that was out there. And I more and more was talking to writers in online communities who were worrying about marketing, and I could see them going down the path I had gone down. So I said, I'm going to do this challenge where I write a story a day in May, which is ridiculous. It's such a ridiculous challenge that it seemed I would have to do it. So I told a few friends, a few friends, and then a bunch of people said, I'll do that too. So the first year, I think it was 97 people signed up to do it with me. And the focus from there has always been on, we've got to be producing words. You can take all the classes you want, you can read all the blogs you want, but until you're actually writing, you're never going to teach yourself how you write. Right. So that has been 15 years now that I've been pushing people to do this ridiculous thing in May. And then throughout the rest of the year, I have other ways that I support writers and other courses and things that we do, and a group now. And now in the group that people opt into, we talk about more than just getting words on the page. We talk about what to do next, revising and publishing and all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of you've got to sort of raise your hand for that. All my stuff on Story a Day, the website, is all about helping people to get out of their own way and just write.
Just so important.
Awesome. Yeah, it really is.
I'm one of those.
And it sounds so easy, right? People are like, well, why aren't you writing? And you're like, because
there's so much to learn. And and it's easy to let the writing be pushed aside as you learn all this stuff about the publishing industry and how to do things. So,
and even if you're not doing that, just all the voices in our heads, right?
Yeah, I was going to say the internal editor. Yeah.
And then daily life gets in the way too sometimes. Well, tell us a little bit about your own fiction writing, your short stories and what you're working on.
Yeah, I've always loved short stories. And I think a lot of us start with short stories because they're more manageable. And that's fine. I loved them for that to start with. And then I started really delving into what people were doing with short stories. And they're so flexible and weird and wonderful. I mean, there are people, that you can do anything with a short story, things that could never support a novel, right? You could write a story about the internal life of a tree, and that would be hard to maintain over the course of a novel. You can write memos or weird little stories. As there's a writer called KB Carl who's quite famously written a bunch of these what are called hermit crab stories, which are things like, it's a crossword puzzle, but it turns out there's a story in there. John Chu wrote a story that was kind of like a technical manual, but if you read the footnotes, there's a story happening there.
Really?
So I got really fascinated by that kind of stuff. So I still will always love short stories, but I will say that after writing A Story a Day in May in 2010, I thought I'd always wanted to do NaNoWriMo, write a novel in November, but I'd always thought I can't write a novel, I can't. That's why one of the reasons I started Story a Day was because I listened to myself whining for so long. Why is there nothing out there for short story writers? And then I was like, oh, because you haven't done it yet. So I'm like, stop whining, get doing. So I made Story a Day. And then after I had done Story a Day once, I was like, oh, writing the same story for a whole month has to be easier than this. That same year, I wrote my first novel. So I've written a bunch of novels in sort of speculative and mystery genres. I haven't really done anything with them yet because I've been having so much fun with Story a Day and working with writers and just leading that community. So I will at some point think about, because I've always wanted to indie publish a novel. I've done some nonfiction books. Because I started out there, I'm like, I should do this, but I haven't actually done that yet. I'm getting close, but I haven't done that yet.
Good. Well, what do you wish authors knew about what you do? And
About what I do specifically?
Yeah, what you do specifically in working with authors and helping with the short stories. And I guess the question is, let me change the question real quick. Sorry, Sarah. What do you wish authors knew? I mean, what do you wish authors knew about writing short stories? Because I will tell you that the thought of writing a short story is very scary to me. I don't think I've ever written one, if you want the truth. So it would be a big challenge to do that every day for a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I would actually like people to know about short stories is that you don't have to write them. It's okay. I think we come up through, especially if you've taken any writing classes or anything like that, which I actually never did, because that wasn't part of the education system the way I came through. But I've met a lot of people in the US who've taken these creative writing classes or, have gone and done MFAs and things like that. And they really do focus on short stories, I think, because they are manageable. And it used to be in the industry, like in the 50s, that you had to write short stories and get them published in literary journals so that you could get noticed, so that you would be allowed to write a novel.
Right.
Now, of course, the business has changed dramatically since then, and nobody has to allow you to do anything anymore. So if you don't love short stories, don't feel like you have to write them. If you are a natural, if you're naturally an epic fantasy novelist, why would you try and pare that down? If you have if you don't have the confidence to write something, if your brain doesn't work in the way that manages those massive sort of interconnected novel thoughts, then give yourself some quick wins with short stories. Go out and find the weird and wonderful things that you can do with short stories. They're not mini novels. They don't have to be structured like a novel. They don't have to be narrative. They can be some blend of almost poetry and almost, stream of consciousness, or they can have a very structured form. There's so many ways to have fun writing things that don't have to conform to something like the Save the Cat structure, or any of these story structures, which can be so helpful for those of us who love writing but never necessarily learned how to write novels. And that's that underlying. We love novels, but we haven't sort of looked at that underlying structure. Also, I found that a lot of people who have attention issues and diversities tend to be drawn to short stories because they seem more manageable. But they are very challenging. It's very, very challenging to write a good short story, which is why I never ask people to write good short stories during May.
Yeah,
just to write a story.
I love that. Because if believe me, they would not be good ones. They're not.
That's part of the point of the challenge is to show people that they can do more than they think. And also that writing a bad story won't kill you. Because if you're going to be a writer, you have to allow the writing to be bad. And it's fine for someone like Anne Lamott to say, write a, first draft, but it's really hard to let yourself do that, which is why I think people keep quoting her on that. It's really hard to let the writing not live up to your own expectations and then come back to it the next day and not feel bad about yourself. So that's part of what the challenge point of story is to say, write every day. They're not going to be good. You can't possibly expect them to be good if you're going to write a story a day, but you're going to write some stuff you like. And you may find you write one or two that you're like, oh, that was quite good. Once you're warmed up and
Yeah. So the volume has something to do with it, right? So
definitely. I mean, you must have found that in your own writing, right? Like if you step away from it for too long, you just feel so rusty, right?
So it's like
it's hard.
We talked about this, like it's a muscle. Like as you use it more, it gets easier. But like if you do take a break and come back to it, you do feel all achy.
I feel like the Tin Man that needs a little oil.
I mean, I'm not anti-break. I think definitely people should take breaks. And this kind of pace that I set in May is not sustainable. because we do need to, I talk about it as like breathing in and breathing out. Like, you breathe out the words, but you got to breathe in sometimes as well. So taking breaks is fine. But yeah, when you've been away from it for like a month, 2 months, it feels like, oh, yeah, everything needs a little oil.
Yeah. Was there anything you wish you knew about working with authors and writers, just overall, like as you worked with them over the years? Are there any things that you're seeing that, oh, that would have been helpful if I'd known in the beginning?
I think it would have been helpful if I had really understood that most of what authors and writers need to learn is, or need to be helped with, is less about the craft, because we're all naturally interested in what makes good writing work well. I think what we really need to work on harder is our mindset. And that's the place where I've been able to help people the most, is just helping them hear the reasons they're not writing and the fears that they have around writing, and, helping them bring that to the surface and look at it and go, oh, is that really, is that really such a big deal? So I think what I would encourage writers to understand, that I've learned over the years, is that the hardest thing about writing is letting yourself do it. And you can learn all the other stuff. You can practice all the other stuff. You can take a class about how to write good dialogue. All of that stuff you can get from out there in the world. But the one thing you can't get is that permission, that inner authority, that belief in yourself. That's something that we have to, I think, constantly work on. And if that's journaling or affirmations or indoctrinations or whatever you do, or being in a group with people, or listening to podcasts where you're hearing people who've done it and seeing that as inspiration, not envying them, that's the stuff that will derail you. And nobody can do that work for you. They can help you with it, but you've really got to work on that. And
that's so good. And that's so true. Oh my goodness. That sort of hit home. Well, what are the most common mistakes you see when you're working with authors, when they're
I would
writing short?
say putting the cart before the horse, worrying about where they're going to sell this thing before they've written it.
Yeah.
Because that stalls you. I mean, it clamps down on your creativity. There's, at a certain point, if you want to get your work to an audience, you have to think about, how am I going to make the reader happy, and how am I going to, all of that stuff. And does it fit in a genre? And sometimes you don't need to care about that, because some people have created their own genres, which you've talked about on this podcast, I think. But thinking about that stuff too soon just squelches your creativity. You've got to I would say that's probably the biggest mistake. Not writing to make yourself happy, because I've interviewed enough best-selling authors who have talked about, once you get to that stage, it's a job, and you really have to make sure that you're creating a job you want. You got to write the stuff that you love. You've got to write in a way that you can sustain. So worrying about that stuff too early, it's not a recipe for success.
Well, what about the opposite? Do you see any commonalities in writers who have been successful over the long haul? So as you've worked with writers, what do you see that helps people continue?
I see something that I think would really surprise people outside the writing world, but would probably not surprise you, which is that none of us do this alone. We form little communities. We form peer groups. People who succeed have a gang that they travel around with, and whether it's in social media or at conferences or when a book's coming out, we lift each other up and we support each other when things are hard. And writing looks like a solitary activity, but being a writer is really a social and community event. So I think that's the thing that I've seen as an absolute commonality in writers who are succeeding. And I don't think we talk about it enough.
Right. Yeah. I think we talk about it among ourselves in our, like we get that question a lot, like, how can I make writer friends? How can I connect with people? And I think once you start doing this, you realize you need people.
Yeah. And I think if you're just writing, if you're writing and you're just kind of getting started, That's great. I think it is also important to find people who are at a similar level or a similar level of ambition as you.
Right. Yes.
So when you're starting out, you don't need to go hang out with people who are already publishing, because that might be a little demoralizing. But you want to find the people who are, whatever your ambition for your writing is, finding people who have similar ambitions can really help elevate all of you.
Mhm.
Whereas if you're hanging out with writers who are less ambitious than you in whatever way that is, whether they don't care if they finish things, whether they don't care if they get things out there, whatever if you're dissatisfied with the writers you're hanging around with, there's lots of us out here. Come find some who are at a similar or like a step or two ahead of you, but have the same values and the same kind of are on a similar path.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
That's a good way to describe it. Similar path. That's what I found when I started out, was that I really wanted to be a genre writer, and I wanted to be published. And a lot of people that I was trying to connect with were not interested in one or two of those things. And so it's like your goals, it's harder to get the connection that you need if the goals are different.
We have enough sort of social obligations in our lives outside writing.
Yeah.
It's okay to step away from a writer's group that's not meeting your needs and find the one that is.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And yeah, I mean, encouragement. You need the proper encouragement. And if you're with people who just really want to produce work, but aren't necessarily interested in publishing it or getting it published, then I'm not sure, if what you're wanting is to really publish and start doing this.
Conversely, if you are interested in writing because it keeps you sane,
yes,
then you don't need to be hanging out with people who are trying to publish, right?
Those people can make you crazy, because I've made a lot of people crazy in my time, especially in RWA, because there were a lot of people that just love to write. They love to write. And they love to write just a little every day, and then come to the meetings and be around people. And that was their happy place. And I made it unhappy, because I was like, we can do this. We can get these books published. You can make money. And, I made it unhappy for them. So, yeah, it turned out to not be a great fit in the end, but it was a great fit in the beginning. I will say that. Go ahead.
We grow in our ambition.
Yes.
And some people have gone from that place where they're like, I'm going to be a bestseller, to, you know what, I just want to write every day because it makes me happy, because like, this is hard. This is hard, especially hard. If you're trying to do it as a job or a career or publish, this is hard. And that's not what everyone wants from their writing. And that's okay. But, trying to finding your lane and switching lanes when appropriate is absolutely fine.
Yeah. You work with a wide range of authors and genres. Do you see any trends? What's hot right now?
I mean, romance is always hot, right?
Yeah.
In so many ways, in every medium.
Yes.
I'm seeing this romantasy coming up. I think everyone's talking about that. Romance fantasy is very big. I'm a fan of sci-fi and speculative fiction, so I tend to follow those crowds. So I'm not sure that I've got at this point a really good overview of the industry as a whole. But I would say, I think romance is gaining ground in that people are talking about it more, and it's undeniable, and you can't ignore it anymore. So I'm seeing it more in the mainstream coverage of publishing, which I think is really fun, and because it's such a diverse. I mean, it's not even a genre at this point, so I think that's a good place to be, and I think that mystery is always big. And sort of combinations of these genres is so much more possible now because of self-publishing and indie publishing. And I think, the big publishers are seeing that too. They're getting, even their literary authors are being encouraged to put plots in their books now, so.
It's such a new thought.
Yeah.
Well, I apologize. I'm always teasing my literary writer friends.
So I'm going to combine two of our questions, because one of them is, how has publishing changed, and where do you see in the future? So like, I mean, do you like, if you want to combine those and say one or the other or both?
That's a great question, because I've been in this for a while. When I started out working in this field, it was 1998, and we were, like I say, my boss had figured out this print on demand thing because he worked for a digital printer, and he was like, I want to bring this to authors. And so that was at the time, if you didn't go through a traditional publisher, you either did sort of like general contracting on your book, and you found a printer and you got 5,000 copies of a book, and you put them in your garage and you drop ship them to people, and you sent out, mail newsletters and stuff like that to try and find readers, and you went to conferences and you lugged your books to cons and things. And they, so that was where publishing was. And so you either did that as sort of the general contractor yourself, or you worked with a vanity press, which had the name Vanity Press, which was not great. And they probably told you, they probably did a decent job of putting together everything for you, but they also inflated, they had to get paid, and they sold you promises and services that were not things that you needed. The PR package, which was pretty much worthless, and the overinflated covers, and they sold you a lot of people. One of the things I really discovered at the beginning was that people don't understand how book selling works and publishing and book selling work. And I didn't, why would you just buy
Right,
a book?
exactly.
I didn't understand that about the 55% discounts to distributors. And I didn't understand that, your book just didn't magically appear in every bookstore in the world, and so I think people have become a lot more educated about that stuff. And vanity presses had such a bad reputation at that point. And then now we have a more complicated world. So there's still big publishers and small presses who will do all of this stuff for you, but they choose you, and you've got to fit into their narrow, thing. And but they've got professionals who are going to help you with stuff. And then you've still got predatory service providers out there, who will promise you the world and deliver minimum stuff that you could probably do for free if you wanted to. And then we've got this hybrid world where people are really making a good faith effort to use the new technologies and not be totally like a traditional publisher, but have lots of support for authors. So I think there's a lot more. You have to educate yourself about that stuff. So there's a lot to learn, but there's also a lot more opportunities and freedom. So I don't think that's going away. I've watched it just grow over the years. And so I think that's going to go. I think that hybrid publishing organizations have an opportunity to be a real powerhouse and a real advocate for authors and readers. And I think everything. So I've been online since the beginning of online. And it was
you and Al Gore together.
Me and Al Gore, yeah. I remember him. We were buds. So I've seen it go from being like little tiny niche communities and places where everything was sort of amalgamated in one place. And now everything's kind of fragmenting, both in social media and I think in publishing as well. So we have the opportunity to have lots of different genres and cross genres and blends of new genres popping up. But by the other token, it's harder to get noticed. Because we don't have, just like with TV, we don't have 3 channels anymore. So it's hard to show nobody's watching all the same shows. So the same kind of thing is happening with writing and books. And I guess I don't know what the solution is for being found. I don't know if we as hybrid authors, indie authors in general, need services that will genuinely help us with marketing and promotion, not just say they're going to and sort of blast out a few things on social media, or if we need to learn it ourselves, or if there's going to be another movement where communities start to coalesce around certain locations and online portals, and like find the romance people. And like, I didn't know that there were these massive signings until there was this big controversy with one of the romance signing events. I didn't actually know that those things existed. So
Oh, wow.
I knew about sci-fi cons, and like, I was very
Yeah.
much in that world. So it could be that things are going that way. But I don't think traditional publishers are going away, but I will say I love them, and I love all the people who go and work at traditional publishers, but they're not business people in general. They're people who love books. And I have heard so many horror stories of like authors working with publishers, expecting this very professional experience. And it's still got a very, I think, and I'm looking at it from the outside, but it still seems like this very sort of collegial, professorial thing where they're doing their best. They're really trying. They've got their hearts are in the right places, or they've got a layer of people who are sort of trying to be the bean counters. And I think the publishing industry doesn't change fast. I remember trying to email people in the publishing industry in like 2000, and they were like, "Oh no, we don't do that.
We want a handwritten.
Yes,
or hand typed. Yeah,
like even just to communicate. No, we don't. So it's. I think the publishing industry is in a phase of contraction, and I don't. It's going to survive. I'm not worried about it. I think they're going to have to get a little more businesslike and a little more,
faster on their feet, maybe.
Yeah.
I think they're trying. I think some
I think
publishers
they are too.
are trying.
Yeah,
and
it
doing
has
a better
changed.
job than others.
Yeah, but I think the pressure from small presses and indie authors, hybrid publishers, and the fact that they will work with, the traditional industry used to be like, with your self-publishing, we don't want to know unless you sold 10,000 copies of your book in a minute.
right.
And I think they've, obviously it's a younger group of people coming through the publishing industry now, and they're like, well, that's crazy. So they will work with people. I think there's a lot more communication and back and forth, and I think it's going to be good. It's not going to go fast, but I think we're, people still love books, and the pandemic showed that the world needs artists and storytellers.
Well, you were talking about hybrid, like a hybrid. Did you say a hybrid house or a hybrid organization? What are you talking about when you say that? I'm curious, and I think our listeners should be.
Yeah, there's some places out there. I think I have a friend who publishes with one. I think it's called Dragon Blade, and so they will help. They have editors on staff. They have, and they take a share of the profit for your book. So they'll take care. They'll do the covers for you. They'll do promotion. They'll front up for things like BookBub ads, stuff like that, and they do the layout and some editing, and you get to sit back and do a bunch of writing for them. And so the books are available on demand, and I think they some of them do paperback, some of them don't, but it's sort of a blend between a publisher where you'll get an advance and have to earn out, and a publisher where you're sort of in it together, and you're like, you provide the words, they provide the publishing industry stuff, and they get a bigger chunk of the profits. But I have a friend who's been running an experiment with that publisher, and she used to self-publish completely by herself and handle everything and all the advertising. So she was doing the experiment where she was seeing if she was making more money this way because she could write more books and she could handle less of the stuff that she didn't want to handle, and if that was worth it to her. And I think the financial side has come out slightly in her favor, but the upside for her is that she gets to just do more writing.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and then they handle a lot of, they do a lot of promotion for her. I see her stuff coming through my inbox. So I think that's a really interesting business model. And I hope that more reputable places will do that.
Yep. That would be good.
Yeah.
Especially if they're reputable. Yeah.
Yeah. Options are always good. Different options are always good.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be traditionally published, nothing wrong with being indie published.
Lots of choices are good. So I apologize. My yard people are here. So if you can hear roaring in the background, okay, good. So we'll just keep pressing on. We did want to talk to you too about flash fiction and kind of your thoughts on that and suggestions if people want to try it.
And a definition.
what is it? And
Yes.
then like tips on if you want to try it.
Flash fiction is extremely short fiction. So if you're in an MFA program, they're going to be pushing you to write, like a 2,000 to 4,000 word, probably 4,000 word short story. And I'm like, what? That's a lot of words. Because I love flash fiction and this shorter fiction. So technically, flash fiction is anything from about 500 to 1,200 words, and you'll see different definitions of it in different places. And flash fiction differs from the sort of overall umbrella of short stories in that it is intended to really pack a punch. It's intended to not just be in a flash, but it's intended to make a flash in your brain. So one of the best analogies I heard for it is from the Rose Metal Press Field Guide to Flash Fiction, and it's about flash fiction is like a firework that explodes and leaves an after image in your brain. So writing flash, it has a lot in common with poetry in the sense that it's going to be concise and compact. You're not going to be able to explain everything. You're probably going to leave gaps. It feels a lot like a collaboration with the reader because you're leaving gaps and making logical leaps and maybe even leaps in time. And you're trusting the reader to unpack the puzzle. And people who are drawn to that kind of story love that. They love not to be spoon-fed everything. They want to unpack the puzzle. So it's really great for people who have that kind of puzzle mindset and love to write and read that stuff. But it's really, really good for people who write longer and want to sharpen their writing. Because you can write something, a flash fiction story tends to be about a moment. And again, from the Rose Metal Press Field Guide to Flash Fiction, there's a description in there by Bruce Holland Rogers. He says if a novel is like being invited into somebody's house and being, getting to like open all the drawers and rummage through everything and explore all the rooms, a short story is like kind of looking in the window and seeing what's going on in that room. And a flash fiction story is like looking through the keyhole. And all you get is this.
That one little thing. Yeah. What's in their line of sight.
And you have to make sense of it. And of course, it's not the whole truth. So it's one moment, it's a flash. It could be somebody walking down a beach and seeing a firework. And like, what does that mean for that person and the person they're with? It could be, this is the kinds of prompts that I give out during Story a Day, May, and throughout the year tend to be geared towards having people think about that. And the reason I say it's good for novelists as well is because there are times in your novel where you want your language to be dense and you want to slow people down and keep them in the moment. And flash fiction is all about that. It's all about the moment. So I really encourage novelists as well to try flash fiction, not because I think you should be writing and publishing it, but because writing a moment is kind of, a novel is made up of moments, and writing about it can help you with things like they can be like exercises where you focus on dialogue, where you focus on character, where you focus on interaction between two characters or describing something. It can sharpen all of those skills. It's also good for people who are getting started out and do want to get some confidence up and get some, maybe they want to go in more traditional route with publishing, because there are so many places where you can get flash fiction published online. And you're not necessarily going to make a fortune out of it. And it might be free publications, but there are plenty of very reputable places online where you can get published.
Really?
Yeah, with flash fiction, and you won't, like I say, you won't necessarily get paid, but they do have a good reputation. So I'm not saying people should write for exposure. That's, but it can be something that's a useful step or a fun thing to do on your writing journey, especially if you're being ground down by trying to get other people to publish or trying to encourage other people to pick up your book because it's good for them, but you've got to sell it to them. You've got to sell that experience to them. It can be really nice to sort of to dash something off, submit it to a flash fiction outlet and have them say, yeah, we'll publish that. And then it's a quick turnaround and you get comments on it and things like that. So it's a form that I love, but I also think it has lots of benefits for sharpening your writing and for getting those quick wins in the writing biz.
Yeah, I love that. See, I think I could write flash fiction
Yeah.
and long form fiction, but it's short stories that seem to trip me up for some
That does
reason.
not surprise me because if you start writing more of a traditional short story, which, has that bit of length and that bit of meat on its bones, it starts to want to become a novel if you're a novelist. And you start adding characters and adding locations and adding, plot thread. And I can teach you how to stop doing that. But it's not fun if that's what you want to be doing. But flash fiction, on the other hand, you go into it knowing this is going to have very few characters, if, one, two, maybe.
Yeah.
It's going to have one location, probably. It might leap ahead in time, be somewhere, but you've got so few words, and you end up paring your writing down to make it really flashy and impactful. You end up revising it, and it becomes a game to see how many words you can cut out, and like, what word could I use that would be better there than those 4 words I used? And that's an incredibly useful skill as well. So I'm not surprised. I have many people in the Story a Day community who've come in saying, I don't know about short stories, but I need something to get me writing again. And I think that is what I see with them. They love the short bursts, and they keep writing their epic novels.
That's fantastic. I'm going to have to think about that. So tell us about what tips you have for getting unstuck in a story.
All right. Getting unstuck in a story. I think when we're stuck in stories, it's usually because we don't know where we're going next. And I'm not saying you need to plot your whole novel. That would not necessarily, it won't work for most people. Not most, it won't work for many of us. There are some of us out here who, once we've plotted the novel in our heads, it's done, and then we lose all interest in it. But I do think you need, when you're stuck, it tends to be because you don't know where you're going next, or you don't know what you're trying to achieve in this scene. So I, at that point, tend to stop, or advise people, and I do it myself, stop and what's this scene setting up? What's it trying to achieve? Or it may be that you don't know enough about your character yet. If you don't know why, you get them into a situation and you don't know how they're going to react. Maybe you need to back up a little bit and do some, maybe write a short story about them in the, or, so I think being stuck is usually about not having enough information yet. And it's up to the individual writer to decide whether or not they need to do character bios or backstory, or whether they're just comfortable with writing around it and find, some people hate the idea of using all those words and then having to cut them out. And some people are like, that's fine. I'll write until I find the path again, and then I'll do it. So, sitting. I'm a big fan of Doctor Who. I don't know if you can see I've got my TARDIS behind me.
Yes.
There's a book, Russell T Davies, who brought Doctor Who back in 2005, wrote a book. He was writing to the editor of the Doctor Who magazine, and they put it together as a book. And there's a part where he's super stuck on, and he's got all the pressure because they're already in production, and he's trying to write this episode, and he gets super stuck, and he stays up all night, and he's writing, I'm just drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes, and it's terrible. And he said, I went 3 o'clock in the morning, I went out for a walk, and he just walked for hours, and he came back, and he sat down, and he was exhausted, and he just started writing, and then finally he found what he was trying to do. And he writes to the editor, it's something like, and I've got this quote written down somewhere, but it's something like, writing, it's so annoying that the only way to get unstuck with writing is to write it. He says, stupid expletive job. I'm like, yeah, and that was somebody who's super successful. I'm like, it never goes away.
Yes, it's funny. Very true. I think that's something we can all sympathize with. We all felt like that.
There's not the perfect idea, the solution is not out there waiting for you somewhere. You have to just write until you find it.
Right. That is so interesting. It's true though, because it's, what are you setting up? Like, what have you set up? Is that where you're wanting to go, or have you set up a completely different route and you weren't you may take that route and it may
And you may
be
take that
even
detour.
better. Yeah. But yeah, what are you setting up? I think
And
that's really such a good question.
You think about the next, when you think about the next couple of scenes, you don't have to think about the end of the book, but there's peaks and troughs in a book, right? There's
Sure.
you build up to the next, and like, what am I building towards right now? And it's taking me there. And you can also think about things like Dan Wells has this 7-point story structure, which I really like because it's not really about the events of the plot, it's about the condition of the character. And are you moving them towards their goal or away from their goal? And sometimes you need to be doing, I mean, you constantly need to be doing one or the other. Right. So that's another thing that you can think about if you're stuck. You know, I've got my character in this situation and things are happening. Am I moving them closer to their goal? And is that right for this point in the story? Or should I be pulling them closer away from their goal? Should they be further away? Should they be making boneheaded decisions right now? You know, should they be antagonizing people instead of getting them on side? So thinking that's a really useful structure, and you can find his lectures about that on YouTube. And it's the 7-point story structure. But I find that really useful because he has points during the story, like by the midpoint, you're going to be moving them at the midpoint, you're going to be moving them towards their goal. But there's going to be some missteps after that, right? So I find that a useful way to think about it as well if I'm stuck.
Yeah, right. That's really interesting because that would help with pacing about.
Yeah.
Because you need the wins and you need the losses to keep
and you don't necessarily want, like, you don't, it's hard to think about it. I find it hard to think about it in that way because you're thinking, I tended to think about it in terms of plot and like happiness and sadness. Like, and you don't necessarily want a disaster to strike your character.
Right.
But you can still be moving them further away from their goal by having them make the wrong decision or, you know, acting on an old impulse and it doesn't have to be a tragedy. It can just be, turn around, you're going the wrong way.
Falling back into old habits or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we like to ask everybody the same question to end with. What's the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success?
What is the best thing I've done to set myself up for success? Not isolate. And it surprised the heck out of me when I discovered that. I joined a writing group just sort of because it was local and I was like, and it was the best thing I ever did because I think we writers are so creative and so interested in the human condition and we just have thoughts running around our head all the time. And that's not necessarily always helpful. And when you get them out of your head in conversation with other people who are interested in the same thing that you are and pursuing the same thing you are, it helps to just sort of calm those voices and remind you of where you want to be going and just sort through the mess. And just, so being in community with other writers keeps me accountable. It reminds me why I'm doing what I'm doing. It reminds me that I love what I'm doing. It stops me from spiraling out of control when I get distracted by all the things I could be doing. And then it creates a craving to be alone and do the work as well. So I think being in community with other writers has been the thing that's been most impactful for me in keeping me writing and making me better.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. That's great. That's great. Well, tell people where they can find out more about you, more about your courses and your short story a day, a challenge, and all of that.
Yeah, everything is at storyaday.org, and you can find me in various permutations of that on social media. Story a Day May usually. So Story a Day happens in May, but there's stuff going on all year round. And for this year, I'm gonna mention a little plug for my new thing, which is I've put out a digital companion to Story a Day May this year, which is kind of, I'm calling it a handbook, and it's writing prompts and warm-ups and brainstorming exercises that people can do. And you can use it during May if you want to write a story a day in May, but it's structured so that you can also dip into it throughout the year and you can do one of the warm-ups, or you can do the warm-up, the brainstorming, and the short story once a week, once a month, whatever you want to do. So that's the short story challenge handbook, which people can find at storyaday.org as well.
Fantastic. That's great.
That is great. We'll have all the links to those things in the show notes, and those will be at wishidknownforwriters.com. And if you want to support the podcast, you can also go to that same link /support. So thank you for being here today, Julie. We really appreciate it. And
Thanks.
I think it's been some great information.
Love what you do.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So thanks to Alexa Lyberg for editing and producing the podcast, and to Adriel Wiggins for doing the admin. And we'll see everybody next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.